My name is Michelle Osborne, and I'm working with ICF and hosting the webinar this afternoon. A couple of things that you've noted already. Sorry, we did place everyone on mute, including, I guess, myself. And so we are trying to do that just to remove as much excessive background noise as possible. And so with that in mind, we're going to go ahead and have a chat feature in place for you guys all to provide your questions during our question and answer sessions at the end of each presentation. So we will leave time for you guys in order to type in your questions through the chat feature. I see some of you have already activated it with our mute a little issue earlier. One thing to note, we do have some very detailed screenshots that we're going to be showing you in a little while, and in order to see a better full picture on your screen, we encourage you to use the full screen feature, which I've highlighted here on it's the little arrow, diagonal arrows, and those will help expand your screen to the largest capability. With that, when your screen is enlarged, and if you would like to send a chat during that time, you need to go to the top of the screen and hover over to get the chat feature box to come back up. Another note is we are recording, as you heard when you logged in, so we're recording the presentation, and we'll have this available for your guys' viewing as soon as we get it up onto the website sometime later this week or early next week. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to Crystal Ayala from SANDAG.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this hour-long webinar. My name is Crystal Ayala, and I'm a regional planner here at SANDAG. Today, we'll be hearing from Audrey Harris from the City of San Francisco and Wilson Tam from the City of San Jose, who will be sharing their experience with developing and implementing transportation mitigation programs. They will also be providing a live demo of the supporting calculator tools that have been developed to complement the planning and development review process. For those that attended our Mobility Management Toolbox workshop in November, you'll know that we had technical difficulties that prevented us from hearing from Audrey and Wilson, so we're very grateful to have them walk us through their efforts. Before we hear from our speakers, I'd like to take a few moments to provide some brief background on similar work that we're doing at SANDAG as part of our Mobility Management Toolbox. As the San Diego Region's Metropolitan Planning Organization, SANDAG incorporates a variety of mobility management strategies in the regional plan to assist in meeting greenhouse gas emission reduction targets set forth by Senate Bill 375. Mobility management includes both transportation demand management, TDM, and transportation system management, TSM, strategies. TDM and TSM together encompass a broad variety of strategies and can include things like programs, capital investments, services, and ITS elements or technologies that complement one another to encourage transportation alternatives, to reduce vehicle miles traveled, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and to optimize the performance and the operation of the transportation system overall. In recent years, the SANDAG TDM program, also known as iCommute, has developed a number of toolboxes and resources to help jurisdictions incorporate or support mobility management strategies. A few of them are listed on the screen up above. A few examples include the Regional Mobility Hub Strategy and the Regional Parking Management Toolbox. And in 2013, we developed a guidebook for how to implement TDM into the planning and development process. To expand upon this guidebook, and in light of the adoption of Senate Bill 743 in 2013, SANDAG was recently awarded a planning grant from Caltrans to develop the Mobility Management Toolbox. The toolbox will help evaluate BMT reductions resulting from implementation of TDM and TSM, and is intended to be a key resource as your jurisdictions implement Senate Bill 743 and make the transition from a level of service to a VMT analysis, as well as to support climate action planning, implementation, and monitoring. I won't spend too much more time speaking about our efforts here at SANDAG, as we'd really like to provide you with enough time to hear from our guest speakers. So if you have any additional questions about the toolbox or would like to learn more about any of the resources I mentioned, you can visit our iCommute website or send any additional questions directly to me. Our first speaker is Audrey Harris, TDM Performance Manager with the City of San Francisco, who will be walking us through the city's TDM program, SHIFT.
Thank you, Crystal. I will move this over to Audrey. There you go.
You good to go?
Yes, we're good to go.
Hi, everybody. I should say hi again. Again, my name is Audrey Harris. I work for the San Francisco Planning Department as a senior manager, specifically managing our TDM program and its performance.
Yeah. So,
just to start off with a little bit of context, San Francisco is a city of over 880,000 people. About 10,000 new people arrive each year, and the region has projected that we will add as many as 190,000 jobs and over 100,000 homes by 2040. If all these new people try to get around by car, as you can guess, our streets will be gridlocked. As of today, we physically cannot add more capacity to our road network, and even if we could, it would not align with any of our citywide policies on prioritizing public transportation, our safety goals, or our goals around greenhouse gas mitigation. So we are constantly asking ourselves, how do we keep people moving as our city grows? And specifically, we do this by asking what private developers can do to contribute to improving our transportation system, and what can they do to really reduce the number of vehicles on the road and the trips that they're taking within the city. And in an effort to do this, we adopted what we're calling our Transportation Sustainability Program. And over the course of 3 or so years, we adopted kind of 3 main components. The first being the adoption of an impact fee that we call our Transportation Sustainability Fee, which really collects funds from new development to invest in our transportation system, specifically focusing on transit and safer streets. In 2016, per SB 743, we got rid of LOS, level of service, as a way of analyzing environmental transportation impacts. We replaced that with vehicle miles traveled, or VMT. And then in 2007, we finally adopted our Transportation Demand Management Program, where we require developers to provide on-site amenities or services that support more sustainable transportation choices for site users. So as you all know, the field of TDM is very broad with different perspectives and different strategies. This TDM program is specifically a development-focused program with a specific goal of reducing vehicle miles traveled. And we do this by applying TDM measures to shift people away from the use of private automobile and into more sustainable modes of transport. Each of these measures has 3 main intentions. The first is, again, to reduce vehicle miles traveled. The TDM measures themselves are provided and controlled by the property owner, and it really focuses on the residents, employees, and visitors of a project site. Also, each of these measures is also rooted in research, literature review, and local empirical data that say that there is an effectiveness in reducing vehicle miles traveled. And know that a document that you've seen before is the CAPCOA Quantifying Greenhouse Gas Mitigation Measures report. That was one of kind of our main places where we reference a lot of our point system in reference to the percentage of vehicle miles traveled being reduced. But besides the benefits in reducing vehicle miles traveled, there are other benefits, right? This program may lead to better environmental environmental outcomes, such as reduction in GHG emissions. Less driving also means fewer collisions, and so this program may lead to improved public health, more active forms of transport. And with the structure of the program as it is, TDM is really integrated on the front end of the design of a development, which leads to better planning processes and follow through further down the road. There are 3 main components of the program itself based on the amount of accessory parking a development proposes, the land use type, the neighborhood context. A point target is calculated representing the potential reduction in VMT, And to meet that point target, project sponsors can choose from a menu of TDM measures. Currently, we have about 68 options within 8 different categories from which project sponsors can choose from. These measures are based on the best available research and data we have today on their effectiveness at reducing vehicle miles traveled. And again, a leading reference for this, a lot of the TDM measures, is that CAPCOR report on quantifying greenhouse gas mitigation measures. To speak more specifically about the range of effectiveness of the TDM measures themselves, for example, installing showers and lockers will give you 1 point, and on the other end of the spectrum, reducing a project's parking supply beyond the neighborhood parking rates or providing transit subsidies will give you more points because those measures have shown to be more effective at reducing vehicle miles traveled. And then there's the implementation strategy with a plan for measuring and enforcing progress. As an additional resource to the program's implementation, we do have a TDM tool that I will go through later. But the TDM tool will output a project's point target based on the amount of parking. This tool is really for anybody trying to figure out the different requirements of the TDM program for a project, whether that be a project sponsor, a planning staff member, or just a member of the public that is curious about a project and what they might be providing on site. The program is comprised of 2 key structural elements, which is really unique when it comes to land use. The first being our planning code, which codifies the legal framework, applicability, exemptions, and time requirements for the program. And the second being the TDM program standards, which provide more detailed implementation requirements and the specific TDM measures for projects to employ. Per our code, there are 3 ways in which a development project can be subject to the TDM program. So new construction of 10 or more units, if there's new construction of 10,000 or more square feet of non-residential uses, or if there's a change of use in an existing building that results in changing 25,000 or more square feet. And all of these projects require a TDM plan that incorporates the 3 main components, regardless if they have a Sequin impact or not. And I just wanted to make that clear that in addition to any requirements or mitigation measures per environmental review, that a project, regardless of that, also has to do a TDM plan. There are 4 main phases to how the program would work for a project. The first being the development of the TDM plan itself, where an application is filed and there is an application fee. The second is the TDM plan review itself, where I and other staff within the department review the TDM plan for clients. Then there's the project entitlement phase, where a project gets approved. And this is really important. Upon approval, the TDM plan gets recorded on the deed of the property. So the requirements and compliance of this TDM program live on with the life of the project in perpetuity. So with that, there is the 4th phase, which is the TDM plan monitoring and reporting. At the beginning of this phase, staff will work with a project's designated TDM coordinator to conduct a site inspection in which we'll be checking for evidence of their programmatic measures. That might look like proof of purchase, any programmatic planning around the transit subsidies in the long run, or marketing materials given to the employees. And then also we'll be checking for the physical evidence of the installation of the physical measures. This might look like real-time information displays, bike parking, what have you, and car share parking or whatever. Again, this program really applies for the life of the project, so there's also annual and monitoring and reporting that is also required. These projects do have the ability to update their TDM plan over time, and if they choose to do that, there's also kind of a form that needs to be completed and a fee associated with that. In addition to monitoring the compliance of the TDM plans, those individual projects themselves, we'll also be monitoring the program on an ongoing basis. This will serve as a basis for not only evaluating the implementation of the program, but also for improving the program to respond to the needs of the city, different research and updates and new technologies to come, to really ensure that this program remains nimble, responsive, and up to date. So you might be asking, how are we doing? Right now, the program is a little over a year and a half young, and as more and more projects with TDM plans come online, we'll be able to gather data to answer questions like what TDM measures might be more effective and why, measures then can be improved, and data concerning best practices shared. And since the program's effective date, we've received over 140 TDM plan applications, with 32 already recorded on the deed of properties. These numbers will grow exponentially, and as there is an application fee, there has been over $750,000 collected that goes towards staff resources and future resources to do more research. On the screen, you'll see that actually 30% of the fees that we do collect are specifically allocated to ongoing research. And then also kind of what we've been hearing from the development community, more or less, we haven't had any major issues with implementation as a result of some of those minor challenges with implementation. We have already gone to our planning commission to update some of the measures. For example, for bike parking, for the residential uses, we just made it more proportional, just to make it better and easier and more straightforward for the development community. And yeah, and the next, all these efforts, I must say, going back to even before 2015, would not have been successful if it weren't for an interagency working group between the planning department, the city's municipal transportation agency, SFMTA, and our county transportation authority. Really took for our directors championship, our board of supervisors sponsorship, and many, many discussions with stakeholders, as you can imagine, from neighborhood and advocacy groups and the development community to really carry the program along to what it is now. As for next steps, kind of always an iteration is research, gathering feedback on implementation, and continuing to report and monitor the program. In addition to kind of that iteration, we're also in the works of scoping out some work to create a TDM evaluation tool to be used to estimate the vehicle miles traveled of residential, office, retail, or mixed-use development project-based attributes. To really understand kind of the larger efficacy of the TDM measures themselves, make sure that we're updating them to really understand their effectiveness and needs in different neighborhoods, different land use contexts, or different project types. And then as far as lessons go, I kind of have three main ones that I'd like to share. Make sure you adopt policies to support your strategies or find the existing policies that can support your strategies. This TDM program isn't a standalone program. The city, county, and region all have different bodies of work that really reference TDM strategies and goals for reducing VMT and single occupancy vehicle. For that reason, working with these agencies who are working to achieve these same goals is really important. Different agencies have different types of resources, so just definitely working with each other to make sure that as a region you're working towards the same goals and on the same page. And then lastly, really back your program up with data. This program is a points-based program where the measures are based on a combination of research, local empirical data, expert industry opinions. It's not perfect right now, yes. But because we know that, really make sure that you have a game plan and set to monitor and evaluate your program in the long run. Then with that, I will go on to a demo of our TDM tool. So this is the interface of our TDM tool. We created this in-house. And just on the top, we have kind of a quick tour, a how-to guide, and just links to more about the program. But so just for simplicity, I'm going to type in an address, a fake project, to be clear. So in step 1, you enter your address, search, so there's 4 main land use categories that are applicable to this program. So I'm going to choose residential. The underlying data on this map is the kind of attributes you would find in a TAZ, a Transportation Analysis Zone. Looking at kind of just the typical, what's the address and what the parcel number is. For this project, I'm going to choose a 50-unit project. For our planning code, 12% of those units are required to be portable. And this project is going to have 10 parking spaces. So as you can probably see on the right side of the screen, we have this area where it shows you your target points and of what your current point is. So later when I start choosing the TDM measures themselves, you can start to see that number change. And just to give you a glimpse of maybe a different amount of parking, what that might look like, I'm going to change the number of parking spaces to 50. So it changed from 11 to 16. So again, this program is really triggered by the amount of parking spaces you're providing. So the next steps are to really go down through this menu and choose the TDM measures that you want on site. And for simplicity, I'm going to choose bike parking, option A here. I'm going to put some car share parking on site. Then again, because we have that requirement for affordable housing, 2 points is already calculated down here. And then also another thing that's automatically calculated is the parking supply TDM measure. Because of the location, the existing neighborhood parking rate is 0.44. We're comparing that to the proposed parking rate of the project, which is 0.2. As you can see, the project parking rate is parked below the existing neighborhood parking rate, and so that's what's generating this amount of points. And then also, per our planning code, for residential, you are required to unbundle your parking, so sell or lease it separate from the unit itself. So you already get 15 points. So this project is a common example of what we see, where the project is already, just by being code compliant, they're already generating a lot of points. And then I wanted to kind of just talk through a mixed-use development example, not really going through the whole looking at the address and typing in the kind of project specifications, but I wanted to let you know that you are able to kind of look at this for a mixed-use development. So just for example, using that same address, in addition to residential, you can also have office. Again, you'll see your target points over here for each of those land uses, and you would just add the project specifications over here. With that, I'd like to stop right there and kind of turn it over to our host.
Thank you, Audrey. Does anyone have any questions? Currently, we don't have any questions in the chat box. I think because we don't have any questions, we're just going to go ahead and move on right now towards Wilson's presentation, and then we can come back to Audrey's and Wilson's presentation with Q&A at the very end. So with that, we'll go ahead and get Wilson set up here. Hey, Wilson?
Hey, can you see my screen right now?
Not yet. Yes. There we go.
Right. Cool. Hi, everyone. My name is Wilson Tam. I am the Interim Transportation Planning Manager at the City of San Jose Department of Transportation. I'm very happy to have an opportunity to talk to you guys about one of the biggest projects that we as a city have accomplished over the last year, and this is the shift from level of service to VMT as our Sequin transportation metric. Before I start, maybe I can start by saying some context about San Jose. So we are a city of a little bit over 1 million people and 500,000 jobs right now. And we as a city foresees to grow our population by 40% by 2040, bringing our population up to 1.4 million people, and our job number to go up so that our jobs to housing, jobs to employed residents ratio would go up from 0.7 today to 1.1 by 2040. So as you can see, we have a long way to go. Right now, San Jose is still a bedroom city with a lot of residents who live in the city and commute to work elsewhere in the county or even elsewhere in the other parts of the Bay Area. And we want to bring more jobs in the city and also more housing in the city to create an integrated jobs and housing environment so that a lot of the commute trips can be done internally. So we divided, as we, how do we handle SB 743 as a state law that is passed in 2013? We're very thankful that the Office of Planning and Research provided us a technical advisory document to guide the city as for how to implement this shift to VMT. After looking into the document, we decided to split the implementation into 2 phases, and we are very proud of our efforts in completing phase 1 this year, and we're going to continue to pursue phase 2 in the near future. In phase 1, these bullet points represent how what we have accomplished this year in terms of we have successfully established our significance thresholds in order to streamline development to develop in the areas that is more focused, more integrated, more urbanized network. We developed a set of screening criteria for developers to meet. So if they meet these screening criteria, then we can presume these projects to have less than significant Sequin transportation impacts, thereby giving them a green light to move forward. So that kind of incentivizes developments to build in the areas that we would like them to develop. We also established a set of mitigation measures. As I will talk more about the options for developers to choose from to reduce their VMT impact. Overall, we have a total of 27 VMT reducing strategies that developers can select from the tool that I will talk more about in the next slide. Again, we developed a Vmt Evaluation Tool as a way to streamline the Sequin review process. we want to take this project as an opportunity to address another huge challenge that we used to experience in the level of service world, which is the fact that developers spend thousands and thousands of money and also months, if not years, of time to kind of hire a consultant to develop a level of service report that is 500-page long, and then the mitigation chapter may just be like a few pages that the public is really interested in looking at. So in order to streamline the process and make the analysis not so much of a burden on developers, we developed this Vmt Evaluation Tool as a way to streamline this process. So instead of figuring out the calculations of VMT, we pre-calculated the VMT for your development using this tool. And what the developments need to do is to work with a consultant to spend the resources on compiling the VMT reducing strategies as your mitigation package. And that should be the bulk of what the analysis should be about. And that's kind of the direction that the city is willing to take forward with. We also want to make sure that some of the mitigation measures will be implemented even after the entitlement is shipped over from one ownership to another. So we set up a monitoring mechanism to require these developments, once they are approved, to provide annual monitoring reporting, to fulfill the annual monitoring and reporting requirements. And I will talk more about that in later slides as well. So in phase two, what we're trying to accomplish in a few years is to make sure that our other policies and programs in the city align with this policy shift. We want to visit the idea of setting up a TDM ordinance similar to the version that San Francisco has in place right now. We also want to revisit our parking minimum requirements to potentially shift to a parking maximum or requirement like that. We also want to be proactive at the state level to pursue a mitigation strategy that our city policy may not be able to accomplish. As you will know more about in later slides, most of our VMT mitigation are localized, local specific physical or programmatic measures. Those are not regional measures such as building a BART station or extending a light rail that is cross-jurisdictional. So we don't see that our policy and our tool to be a good value to get the regional improvement that we as a Bay Area really need to accomplish this regional traffic shift. So we want to be proactive at the state level to be involved in the idea of how to address this regional problem together using this VMT as a leverage. One thing I want to note is that our Congestion Management Agency, VTA, is also taking the lead to develop this a Vmt evaluation tool for all member agencies in the county to use. So we expect that our Vmt evaluation tool that we develop in the city will probably phase out in the near future, but we are very happy about that direction because we value the importance of the VMT calculations being consistently calculated and implemented across all jurisdictions at the regional level. So this slide is about the significance thresholds that we established. We used the recommendations made by the Office of Planning and Research on setting thresholds, which is 15% below either a citywide or a region-wide baseline. The way we establish our significance thresholds is we evaluated the citywide average VMT using our travel demand model. We also evaluate the Bay Area-wide VMT levels using the same model and figure out if we populate a heat map like what you're seeing on the map right here, which threshold would give us a better, which threshold would lead the city to having a development be built in a focused growth area. And we realized that by using a citywide average, which is more stringent than the Bay Area level based on our methodology, we are able to get the development to build in the green area. So we decided to use the threshold that is calculated based on the citywide average. And the green area that you're seeing here are what we call the low VMT area, which means these are the areas in which the VMT levels is less than our threshold. So if a developer would like to build in the green area, basically we can presume that your building and your development will generate a VMT level that is less than the threshold. Thereby, you don't need to spend resources of calculating your VMT level. We have already pre-calculated for you. All you need to do is to fulfill the requirements set forth in our policy in terms of making sure that your development is not is transit supportive, will lead to the same VMT level as we have today, if not better, and not doing something that will bring up the VMT level for the surrounding area. So, however, if you are trying to develop in the red area, that means you are located in a high VMT area, which makes it very difficult for you to reduce your VMT impact. In fact, the red area represents the area where the impact is unmitigable, meaning that regardless of how you choose your mitigation measures, you're probably not going to reduce your VMT level to the threshold that we require you. What are we going to do with that? That means the developers will not have a green light. That means if they still want to pursue the project, they would have to do a EIR. In our policy, we set forth a set of considerations that the council can adopt to consider as part of the determination of overriding considerations, meaning that criteria such as if you provide enough community benefits to the city, such as affordable housing, such as bringing a transit improvements that can really evolutionize how the travel behavior is in your area, then the council would consider that as adequate criteria to be considered to consider an overriding your impact. But we really want to push these development from happening in the red area. We want to push them more inward towards the downtown area or our focused growth areas, which is the green areas and the yellow areas. So this is the interface of our Vmt Evaluation Tool, which I will have a demo shortly. So basically, this is a spreadsheet tool that we developed with help of a consultant firm and peers. So basically, what is very good about this model or this tool is that we are able to calculate the existing VMT levels within half-mile buffer of your site. So we are assuming that if the development is not going to do something substantially different from your counterpart's building within that half-mile buffer of your area, then we can presume that your building or your development is going to generate the same levels of VMT as your counterpart buildings. So we are able to pre-calculate for you your existing VMT levels within that buffer area and give you that number as your baseline. And your job as a development is to try to compile your VMT reducing strategy package to hopefully reduce your VMT levels to the one that is required by the policy. So this is kind of the step-by-step process of how our tool is utilized. So as I mentioned, you start with the existing VMT, which is defined by the VMT levels that is being generated by apartment building within a half-mile buffer of your site, and that is your orange line. The black line is the Sequin Threshold, the 10-point-something number that you just see in the previous slide. So you would enter in your project description and the set of VMT reducing strategies that you're willing to provide as part of your project. And that would bring your VMT level down to the project VMT level, which is the gray line. If the gray line is still above the black line, that means you're still going to have a VMT impact. So what you need to do is to come up with the mitigation measures, which would include TDM, transportation demand management measures. We want to make sure that the TDM measures is included as part of your mitigation instead of being part of your project. Because of the fact that TDM measures are programmatic measures, that is really hard to enforce, even though we would have a monitoring program for you to abide with. So instead of having mitigation, instead of having the TDM measures as part of your project, we would like the development to include TDM measures as part of your mitigation. And the other physical measures, such as increasing the density of your site or providing more mixed-use components in your site, or, for example, providing a physical connection between your site and an external bike lane, for example, those are physical measures that can be included as part of your project because those are physical improvements that will stay there forever once you implement them. So the goal is to have a yellow line that is less than the black line. And in our demo later, I will show a theoretical example of doing this step-by-step process. So as I mentioned, there are 4 categories of VMT reducing strategies. We evaluated a total of 90 research papers and come up with a five-point system to rank the validity and the defensibility of these research and strategies. And we filtered out more than half of the 90 papers that we read and come up with a total of 27 VMT reducing strategies that satisfy our defensibility scoring system. So, and we divide those 27 strategies into 4 categories. Project characteristics, such as density, the diversity of your uses, and affordability of your housing, or the density of your intersection framework. The second category is mobility, whether you're willing to provide a connection between your site and the existing multimodal network, such as a bike lane or a major transit hub or major transit station. Parking, whether you're willing to reduce your parking supply. Today, we as a city has a parking minimum requirement. So we would encourage development to not exceed the parking minimum that is required in our code. So if you're willing to minimize your parking to the extent possible as required by our policy, then we will evaluate the difference between your parking supply and a typical parking supply of a project similar to your uses, and there will be VMT credits associated with that that would be given to the development. The last category is TDM. We have a set of about 12 to 13 TDM measures that developments can choose from, including transit passes and whether carpool or van pool. As I mentioned earlier, we would like all approved development to provide monitoring data to the city. That can serve 2 purposes. First, we want to make sure that these approved development satisfy our regulatory compliance. If you identify these improvements as part of your project or mitigation measures to reduce your VMT levels, you want to make sure that you implement these strategies. And the second purpose is that we want to have more local data. Based on the 90 paper that we evaluated, a lot of the study sites and a lot of the data associated with these research papers are not San Jose related. Or so there is a question about the validity of applying these algorithms and these data to apply to San Jose. We do not know so far whether these strategies are applicable or are effective in San Jose. So we want more local data to establish a feedback loop to help us to feed these data back to our tool to make sure that our algorithms, our data, the elasticities and effectiveness are updated as more local data are available. Because of the same reason that we do not understand fully the effectiveness of these VMT reducing strategies in San Jose, in our policy, we provided the flexibility of approved developments to utilize or change their TDM plan or change their mitigation plan. We do not necessarily care about what strategies that can get them to reduce their VMT level. We just care about the results. So in our monitoring requirement, we require that when these developments submit their monitoring reports, they would specify what strategies did they implement throughout the last year and what is the VMT level that they are able to accomplish. Because of the lack of resources in-house in our department, we would like these developments to utilize outsourced help, such as a consultant, to help them evaluate their VMT levels to make sure that all the VMT reducing strategies that they developed would be fully described in the monitoring report. And our resources in the city would be spent on reviewing these documents and make sure that their final VMT levels comply with the number that they identified it in their CEQA document.
Wilson, I'm going to just stop you. Oh, there we go. We're at a 10-minute. We have about 8 minutes left, and we want to leave some time for Q&A. So just check in and where we are with.
Great. Let's see. I have maybe I will quickly do a 1-minute demo if you don't mind. I have a cheat sheet in front of me, so I can do that very quickly here. So basically, I would enter in the parcel number, APN number, and enter in the, the project description. So let's say we have 30 dwell units, 200 KSF of office, 100 KSF of retail, and the proposed parking is 100 vehicle and 20 bike parking. And as you can see, the orange bar exceeds the black line. So 10.12 is what we really need to get at. So the residential VMT is still above the threshold. The commercial VMT is also about the threshold. So how are we going to do with that? So there are 4 categories of strategies that they can choose from. The one that the development may be interested in providing is a connection of bike access between an external bike lanes to your site, thereby reducing the existing distance to a nearest existing bike facility to 0, providing traffic calming measures that is beyond your frontage area. They would also like to reduce a parking supply from the level that is required by the code to a lower number, providing that they're able to work with the city to come up with a RPP program to limit parking intrusion. For example, they would like to increase their end-of-trip bike facility, such as a bike parking shelter, to really enhance the bike parking environment. And let's say they would like to choose a set of TDM programs, such as bike sharing program. I think there are two more that they would like to include: a ride-sharing program. Let's say 50% of the employees will be eligible. And last but not least, they would like to implement a voluntary travel behavioral change program. Again, 50% of employees are eligible. And now you will see that the yellow bar would have a number that is less than the threshold levels in both the residential VMT and also the employment VMT side. So thereby, if a development gives you a report, which is, there's a tab that shows the report that describes what we just did. If the development just print this out and give it to our city, we will evaluate this report and say that you're basically going to have a less than significant transportation impact under CEQA. So that is kind of the purpose of developing this tool, is to really streamline the development review process. So with that, that's about it. I'll open up for Q&A session.
Thank you, Wilson. We did have one that goes back for Audrey. Audrey, it was asked if, did you have to have a TSMO program established? Because usually a TDM program rises out of a TSMO program as a strategy to TSMO.
You're talking about the Transportation Sustainability Management. What does the O mean?
They did not specify.
I answer guessing what I think it means. So in the beginning, before I mentioned that we adopted a transportation sustainability program. This included all of our different agencies at the city level and the county level, which really spelled out kind of the direction for the three main components that were meant to address the question of how do we keep the city moving with all the growth, aka how do we maintain our transportation infrastructure physically and programmatically. So we have the development of the impact fee, which is taken from new development and really allocated towards improvements to transit and safety. The second component was removing the level of service analysis for auto delay and replacing that with evaluating vehicle miles traveled on a citywide level, much to the description that Wilson has been speaking about. So looking at that threshold and making sure that the expected VMT is below that threshold. And then the third component, which is the TDM program, which is the kind of development strong arm, if you will, make sure that we're attacking reduction in VMT at different angles. Hope that answered the question.
Okay. So, yeah, they specified the Transportation System Management and Operation Program mandated by FHWA out of MAP 21.
I will have to answer that one through email.
All right. Any other questions? We did get another one. This one's for Wilson. Sorry, we're jumping all over. Wilson, how did you measure the VMT in the orange zone, and what tools are being used? That was in regard to one of your slides. Yep, there. One. It was in. It was given in your slide before the promote. Back a little bit more. Yes, the streamline. There you go.
I think the question is referring to the orange bar that is showing on the screen right now. So we utilized our travel demand model, which is a trip-based travel demand model that was not validated at the county-to-county, VMT levels. So we took a 3-month effort of trying to validate our model to project a accurate VMT data. So we utilized the county-to-county origin and destination information by trip purpose, and at the end we are able to generate VMT levels by TAZ, traffic analysis zone. So each traffic analysis zone would have a VMT per capita data, and the way that we translate the way that we translate the VMT levels from a TAZ to a parcel level data is that we went through a smoothing algorithm. We draw a half-mile buffer area around each parcel and calculate the weighted average of the VMT per capita data for all the TAZs that are within this buffer, and that basically represents the VMT level for your parcel. And that's the basis for developments to start from.
Okay, and so, go ahead.
Yeah, so this is the only method that we are using to generate the existing VMT level. As the city is currently pursuing a big data transportation big data solution to the city, and we are exploring the idea of using big data to inform the existing VMT levels for the area and use that to do validation processes with our model or future long-term model that we are pursuing.
Thank you. All right, so we've got a few more questions, and I know we're out of time. Crystal, we can either collect these questions and have a follow-up, send them to you or if we want to go a little longer, it's up to you guys.
I think we're okay going a little bit longer. If anyone wants to stay on and listen, it'd be great.
Okay. Sure. So, Wilson, we have another question. In your last example, would that project then do an MND with an MMRP to ensure that the VMT reductions are in the future?
Yes. The VMT levels, the VMT threshold, which is 10.1 threshold will be stated in the MMRP. And that's the number that they have to comply with. The MMRP is going to include a set of VMT reducing strategies that they put together in their Sequin document. But the MMRP is not going to say that these strategies have to be implemented by the development. Instead, the MMRP is going to say that a combination of strategies that will lead you to these VMT levels will be okay. Will be accepted.
All right. Another question for Wilson. How did you come up with the Sequin threshold for VMT?
So as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, that we looked into the technical advisory document provided by the Office of Planning and Research, and the recommendation by OPR is to utilize the 15% below a baseline to establish your threshold. And baseline can be defined in many ways. And the way that the OPR recommended is to use either a citywide average or a region-wide average as your baseline. And you subtract 15% from that level, whichever you choose. We compared the existing citywide average and also the existing region-wide average, and we calculated the threshold based on these different baselines, and then created a heat map like you're seeing right now, and see which heat map is more acceptable to the city. We realized that if we use the region-wide average to be your baseline and you subtract 15% from that baseline, you're basically seeing that the majority of the citywide land would be green, because the entire Bay Area would have a higher VMT than the city level. So if we use a less stringent level as your baseline, thereby your threshold will be less stringent, then that's basically give a green light to development building in anywhere in the city, which we do not want. We want to create a green area that fits with our focused growth concept and focused growth goal in the city. So we feel that by using the citywide average as the baseline and to create a threshold based on this citywide level, we are able to accomplish a green area that looks something like this. And we are able to encourage and incentivize development to build in these areas and not to go through a very cumbersome and also difficult EIR process should they build in the yellow, orange, or red areas.
I believe there are no more questions. Crystal, or did anyone else have anything else they wanted to add?
No, thank you very much, everybody, for joining this webinar. We will be posting the webinar on our iCommute website, and we'll be sending out an email to you all shortly after. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Everyone have a very nice afternoon, and thank you for participating.